Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. We're ranking the top 100 players across the NBA here on the Locked On Network. Where do we put Luka Dončić and the rest of the Lakers? That is next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Lakers, your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one is always going to be free, Andy. It's never going to be behind a paywall. And of course, Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 36,000 subscribers to the channel, Andy. All wondering if it's August, is it Rankin season? Well, yes, it is. And we're going to get to that in a moment. Do want to let people know first that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So we got a lot to cover in today's show. Mentioned the rankings. We're going to react a little bit, both in that conversation and later in the show, to the reaction to Thursday's show with Austin Reeves asking that question of whether or not he is a really good long-term running mate for Luka Dončić. So all of those things coming up, Andy. But I mentioned if it's August in the NBA, it means we've got some space to fill, which means we're ranking things. And we are no different here at the Locked On Network. The top 100 NBA players, that is what all the hosts are working on now. It is not out yet, but as Andy and I really, really hate ranking exercises, we are going to go ahead and use it for content today rather than waiting for the list to come out.
And as Brian said, both of us find rankings and rankings lists and things like that to be kind of silly, dumb clickbait. But A, it was mandated by our bosses to participate, and we are good company men who want to keep our jobs. And B, it is August. and Brian and I have committed. We've really
full
committed.
Disclosure.
Well, just so our fans, that sounds presumptuous. Our audience. Well,
Look who's got fans. Jeez.
I'd like to think that they're fans of us, but either way, you're our audience. You might be hate watching, click, or the download counts the same. So whatever.
Fans.
I don't even remember what I was going to say about our audience.
They're lovely people, all of them. Even the ones, like you say, who clearly are hate watching. Some of them have been doing it for decades at this point, like following us on social media and listening to the podcast and screaming at us in anger for nigh on a decade or more.
Thank you. We love you.
In some ways, I kind of love you more than the other ones. Like, I kind of respect it. Like, what are you doing? But anyway, so yes, like, I don't know where everybody else has it. I have, of course, a Luka 1 across the league, LeBron 2, Reeves 3, Rui 4, and going on from there. But I do think, though, there is a little bit of value, not necessarily in arguing about where players are, but like what it means relative to each other. And then when it's all said and done, like, how many top 100-ish players do the Lakers have? Top 50-ish players do the Lakers have? It's different to have two guys who, could be considered top 10 players. There's a difference between 5 and 10, 10 and 20, 50 and 80. Like, it's just, and then per the conversation that we had around Austin Reeves for Thursday's show, a lot of what people were talking about when they reacted negatively to the idea of Reeves, being a long-term piece of the team now that they have Luka, is related to the money that he makes. It can be overpriced. It can be this, that, whatever. And so, like, okay, well, where do you think he ranks among other NBA players? And then how much do those guys make? And like, what does it cost to have that guy who's not a star, who maybe not even is an all-star, but these are really good players that you need to win. So I do think there's a little bit of value in investigating it that way, which is where we'll start. But of course, if you're going to do this, it's like, okay, who's your best player? What does your star of stars look like relative to the other stars across the league? I have Luka currently fourth. behind Jokic, Shea, Giannis, and then I have Luka. I thought about flip-flopping Giannis and Luka, but Giannis is coming off, I think, a little bit more productive of a season. Although he didn't lose 31 pounds like our guy Luka Dončić has. Where do you have him?
I had Luka also at 4th. I don't want to get into the weeds of every single one of our rankings, who was around them, but my top 4 was Jokic, SGA, Anthony Edwards, who I think is going to continue ascending, and I think our everyday viewers and listeners know how much I value two-way play. And because Ant is going to be ascending as a two-way player, that's where I had him very slightly and in some ways even reluctantly ahead of Luka at 4. If you think Luka should be ahead of him, fine, whatever. It's a perfectly defensible position that, just to get ahead of the comments section, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not. But I had Luka at number 4, and I think you could have made an argument for him at number 3. He is that level of a player.
What I think is really fascinating about this is, like, when you look at it, like, everybody wants a star that's like kind of got no holes, a player that, is sort of bulletproof and all of these things. And I think there is exactly one for sure of those guys. And I'll even say 2 now, because I think Shea is turned himself into he's not the best defender on Oklahoma City, but he's a pretty good defender. I mean, he defends. And Jokic has turned himself into a pretty good defender as well. And
Jokic is so one-of-one. Jokic may be the most matchup-proof player in the league.
And so, but when you start to put these things down, I have Ant a little lower than you do or whatever, and then, you start very quickly getting into players that have question marks, like Steph. Still a phenomenal player, doesn't quite defend like he used to, even all relative, and is significantly older. Like, Wemby is coming back from, what hopefully isn't an important injury, but is ascending. You can, then Donovan Mitchell or Jalen Brunson, Jason Tatum is hurt. Tyrese Halliburton is hurt. Anthony Davis is hurt a lot. Kevin Durant, Cade Cunningham. We can talk about this next. What does it mean for the Lakers to have a guy now that you can squarely put in that category of players who are, I don't want to say flawless, because Luka isn't flawless, but, top end Luka, which is what I think people are expecting to see again this year, following a really constructive offseason. What was it, 2 years ago? It was like 33.5, like 8-8 or something like that. I mean, those are insane numbers. And to be able to put that up puts you squarely in this upper echelon of players at 26 years old. So to have one of those guys, as opposed to even LeBron, who we'll talk about next, and Anthony Davis, where they were last year, I think it's kind of a game changer. We'll get to it next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Open Phone. And if you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Like, if you've ever had a service emergency and the first person or company that you called didn't answer, you didn't just sit around waiting for them to call you back. You called someone else. Again, money left on the table. It's why you need Open Phone, the #1 business system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications, all through an app on your phone or computer. You don't have to carry 2 phones. With Open Phone, you can manage business calls and texts from one app, whether at your desk or on the go. There's a shared inbox so your team can jump into any conversation without missing a beat. And the AI agent that they have handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, captures leads, so you never miss a customer. Open Phone is offering our listeners 20% off their first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you are switching from another service, Open Phone will port your existing numbers at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers.
So I think it is fair, assuming Luka kind of returns to form again. Even last year, when in his quote unquote off year, his numbers are still pretty good. Assuming he ascends back into that first team All NBA form, the Lakers have one of the very small handful of players across the league who you kind of can put into the star category without really worrying about it, without any big caveats. Donovan Mitchell, people question his playoff performances, and Jalen Brunson is not a good defender. Again, we talked about the guys who were injured. AD is hurt, never quite. You understand what I'm getting at. It's a big difference between what the Lakers had, even with an AD LeBron core last year, and the questions that surrounded those two guys.
Well, I think it's also extremely important with Luka. You're not just talking about a top 5 player. You're talking about a top 5 player that is just entering his prime. And
Correct.
For example, if you're looking at what I am guessing is the consensus top 4 players in the league, I think and as I'm guessing the final list for Locked On will shake out some order of Jokic, SGA, Luka, and Giannis. Maybe Ant squeezes in there, but only a couple of those guys, SGA and Luka, and I guess Ant, if he happens to end up in there, are at the early part of their primes or just entering. Jokic is in kind of like the middle to middle back of his prime, and he's a player that I think is going to age very well into his prime, but nonetheless, you start getting into age and mileage issues more than some other guys. Giannis has been playing for a while. He is in his 30s. Like, there's something that you gain just from having one of those guys entering their prime because the runway is longer. Like the opportunity to plan is bigger. It's one of the reasons why I think it's so important that the Lakers be trying to maximize what they have right now in Luka's prime in terms of planning the roster, as opposed to like waiting around, if according to some reports, for like the perfect number 2, i.e. a superstar. And that could mean sitting on potential opportunities. I would look to try to maximize this because you only get guys at this age, this level of player at this age pretty rarely. The Lakers have not had a guy like this since Kobe. They've not had a superstar that is capable of carrying a team as the number 1 guy, being the number 1 focal point of a team that gets to the finals and beyond. They've not had a guy like this since Kobe. Like that.
Well, I mean, I think you can make an argument when LeBron first got here, he was still that guy. But
but he was at the back. But he was at the back end of his prime, and at the time, at least, they didn't realize how long they would have for him to play. And either way, though, he was not chronologically in his 20s. He was in his mid-30s.
I mean, I think all I mean is to say that, like, as it turned out, he was still playing at that level for longer.
And Anthony Davis has not shown that he can be that guy. He's a great player.
No, but he's a tier below. And I think that's kind of the distinction that I'm making here is, like, as great a player as Anthony Davis is, and there are times, we talked about it all the time when he was here, it's like there are times when he is squarely in the top 10 of players in the NBA. There are times when he's squarely in the top 5. There are times when he looks like the most dominant player in the NBA. And the reason we think rankings like this are kind of dumb is because on any given night, the second best player in the league might play like the 8th. The 15th might have 2 weeks where they play like the 3rd. It's just like, sort of, where are you broadly? And, so you combine this aspect of it with LeBron, because I think LeBron is a super intriguing player to rank, especially in a season where Jason Tatum's not going to play, where Tyrese, it's possible, but like functionally he's not going to play. Tyrese Halliburton's not going to play. You're starting to look at an aging, guys like Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard with his long injury history. And, there aren't even that many players in the league that are going to be on the floor this year that I think are definitively better than LeBron. But now LeBron goes from being your best player to your second best player. So whether I stuck LeBron at 8 this year just based on who's not playing.
That's part of it too. Yeah.
If Tatum was there, and Halliburton, I'd have bumped him down a couple spots. But even then, I have him right at the edge of the top 10. Yeah. But now your second best player is a top 10 player. Like, that is another one of these things that changes the complexion of your talent composition at the top. It is different than having Anthony Davis and LeBron James.
In my rankings, there were only two teams that had two players in the top 10. It was the Lakers and it was OKC. I had Shea at number 2 and I had Jalen Williams at 7. I think Jalen Williams is going to continue to ascend and become one of the best young two-way players in the league. I mean, there was a period during the OKC's championship run and even in the finals where there was some conversation about whether or not Jalen Williams should win finals MVP. So I've been high on him for a while. I think he's that good of a player. But the Thunder and the Lakers are the only teams that I had with two guys in the top 10. And, there's only a handful of players that had, or a handful of teams, I should say, that had 2 or 3 guys in the top 25 or 35, something like that. We can go through some of these as we go along, because I think they're actually kind of instructive for recognizing the Lakers' strengths, but also some of the weaknesses on their roster in the way it's constructed, even with acknowledging the talent. I think in kind of to your point earlier, if you're going to do these rankings to debate 38 versus 37, it's just, like you said, kind of a waste of everybody's time.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're thinking about this in terms of tiers of players and your overall roster construction and how do your best players complement each other, offset each other, stuff like that, it actually is a very interesting and useful exercise.
Yeah, and I think, obviously there are going to be defensive questions. Lakers, showed they could play good defense, over stretches of last year. And obviously that had a lot to do with LeBron not having to be the proverbial head of the snake offensively. And while I don't expect that sort of post-Miami uptick in defense that LeBron showed last year to be an 82-game thing this year, I do think that you will see a higher investment defensively from LeBron relative in October and November relative to last October and November, just because he can, just because it's there for him, especially in bigger games, more significant games, and stuff like that. So if he's healthy, I do expect that he'll be able to devote more of that energy to defense. And when he is invested, LeBron can still be a very effective defender. And B, when LeBron defends, this is a point you made a lot last year, when LeBron defends, everyone defends because the old man's over there doing it. And now you add Luka into that with the leadership he's shown. I saw a really interesting thing that one of his coaches in Serbia said, not only has he lost weight, he's talking more. He's all that sort of leadership and stuff. So if he's investing and is able to be a little bit more spry defensively, now your two best players are really putting it in. And so that is going to elevate what the Lakers do on that side of the floor too. So I do think you can get more defensively out of LeBron, even at his age, just because of what Luka does offensively.
I hope so. I mean, while the roster may not be completely finished in terms of what they might be planning, during the season with a trade or whatever,
right? It might look different in the playoffs,
right? Oh, sure, but how you play in the regular season affects your seeding for the playoffs, which can affect how well you play in the playoffs, how long you last. And this is a concern for the Lakers. We'll get into more of the specifics coming up next, but I had 4 Lakers in the top 100.
Interesting.
One of them just barely getting in, but there is a fair amount of redundancy, or at least potential redundancy, in the Lakers top 100. And I don't think any team with multiple representatives, at least on my list, with as many high representatives as the Lakers had, also have as much potential redundancy within their top 100 reps.
And I think that gets to Austin Reeves. We'll tell you where we have him ranked as well next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're about baseball under the lights, golf on the greens, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach like losers. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether you are placing a same-game parlay, or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you are part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5, $5, and you get 150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So just pick something super obvious. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started.
So we'll get to your fourth guy here in a second, but I think a lot of people are certainly going to be curious about where Austin Reeves lands. Again, it's not about the specific number. I think what's interesting is, to me, who I had him near, and then how much those players make. Where did you have Reeves?
51.
Okay, I have 50. I have him at 53. Okay. So for all
Basically
these people who keep saying I am too pro Reeves, Andy thinks he's even better than I do. So, the group of players I have around him, like 5 ahead, 5 behind, and again, I think all of these guys are basically the same in one way or another. You can make arguments. Julius Randle, Zion Williamson, who's obviously can be a more productive player, but he never plays. Kyrie, but he's not going to be playing. That's about where I think he is in the league. Lauri Markkanen, Tyler Hero, Trey Murphy, Rudy Gobert, Jared Allen, Dyson Daniels, Denny Avia.
We've got a lot of the same.
Right,
we've got a lot of similar players.
Right after that, Norman Powell was in that group. And so, I think you can argue about whether or not is Reeves as good as those guys. I think if you go to a lot of these team sites and like, what do they say about Tyler Hero in Miami? He gets a lot of the same criticism that somebody like Reeves does. He's not quite good enough, whatever. But Tyler Hero makes a lot of money, or is going to. Lauri Markkanen makes the same. We talk about Austin Reeves at $30 to $35 million next year, or let's call it even 35. That's what most of these guys make, or somebody like Mikal Bridges who makes even more. That's what a player like this costs.
Tyler Hero, you just brought him up. He makes currently in the 30s. He's got a season coming up at 31, another one coming up at 33, and it's important to remember that a lot of this gets based off percentage of the cap. Timing is everything. It is, unless you're coming up against a season where there's all of a sudden a crunch, it's always better to go later. The later you get paid, generally speaking, the more you're going to get paid.
But Julius Randle is a little over 30. Avia doesn't make as much money as that, but he's a guy who's sort of been sneaky. But Bridges makes much more. Fred VanVleet is coming off 2 seasons, who I have him ranked below AR, and obviously he's making less this year. But he's coming off 2 huge seasons of money, or was it 1 or 2? I forget. But my point is, like, for people on the comments section, this was something that came up a ton in the reaction to our show for Thursday, saying that Reeves is overpaid. Like, it's ridiculous once you start paying him, he doesn't produce that way, whatever it is. Line up his production against other guys who make $30 to $40 million a year in the NBA. And, I understand the criticisms. I understand people want more out of the guy, or maybe just don't like the I think it's true. Like, how much of this is just really liking the mythology of Austin Reeves versus the actual player? Plucky white guy. We all love him. But he also averaged 25 and 5 basically last year. Like, not a lot of players in the league did that.
Well, it's also important to remember that when you and I were saying that we think he's going to get somewhere between like 32 at the low end, maybe 37 or 38 on the high end, this is not us lobbying for that salary for Austin. Like, I'm not making the case that, he needs to get paid this, or he's somehow being disrespected if he's not. We're just saying we've been doing this for a long time. I think we're reasonably good at reading the market. This is what he's likely going to make. Like, right. It's an objective, or at least objective as we can possibly be, about something in the future, reading of the market and what we think is going to happen. This is again, not us making a passionate case for Austin Reeves' next contract.
Yeah, and you start going down the list and you get into 60s, 70s, 80s. Okay, you can find. I agree with a lot of the people in the comment section who were like, don't use that money on Reeves. Go get, a couple, you can get 2 or 3 players. And fill those holes of 3-and-D guys and guys who can two-way defenders who can shoot and all this and go through the list. Those players do not exist. You're not getting 2 players for $35 million who are established 3-and-D wings who can play 2 ways and handle the ball a little bit like that. You are not getting 2 players for $35 million who can do that at the level that you want to, unless you draft that player.
Right. And the Lakers are, for better or for worse, never in the position to draft and develop those sort of players. So that leads to where we are. This though gets back to one of the things I brought up before about my concerns about Luka and Austin as a foundation, because I think they don't do enough as theoretically your top 2 paid players or the foundation of your team. I don't think they do enough to offset what either one of them doesn't bring. I think they bring a lot of the same things, don't bring a lot of the same things. And I think that can be problematic when you're building a roster, particularly if LeBron, who you noted may be, when he wants to be and when the time requires it, he can be a pretty effective defender, but he's also 41 years old, and it's not ideal if you are depending on LeBron to be one of your best defenders. My top 4 guys.
Although this may be, to be fair to the Lakers in terms of the extension conversation, LeBron may not be there when.
Well, sure, but I'm saying this is part of the reason why, and I've taken a lot of heat for this over the last year and even longer, when I've said I don't think the Lakers can continue with LeBron in this current setup of 50-ish mil a pop in perpetuity with never-ending player options, and then Austin Reeves getting paid. Now you have Luka. I don't think you're going to be able to build a team around those particular 3 guys who bring many of the same things and don't have a lot of variety in what they don't bring. And case in point, like the 4 players that I have among Lakers in the top 100, LeBron, Luka, Austin, we just talked about. And I had DeAndre Ayton at 100. And that was a bit of me calling my shot that I think Ayton playing in this atmosphere is going to rejuvenate him. And it's going to refocus him. And you're going to get, if not the 2021 version of Ayton that was a big part of the Suns going in the finals, somewhere much closer than what the last couple of years for him have been. But even if you, and it's great.
Yeah, and I think you can put, I think you can absolutely sneak Ayton in there, especially if you think he's going to have a rebound. Like my 99 and 100 are Jabari Smith Jr. and Walker Kessler. So I've Duran, the Pistons at 94, I think. So, you could argue that Ayton could end up in that group.
But one of the concerns that I have about the Lakers, and maybe we can even get into more of an in-depth discussion about this for Monday, kind of breaking down these teams and how many of them have players in the top 10, top 20, top 50 and beyond. The Lakers, for me at least, have 4 players in the top 100. But if you look at Luka, LeBron, Austin, and Ayton, there is not a ton of balance. Like there is not a ton of this guy brings what the other 3 don't bring. This guy brings what the other 3 don't bring. Like there's a lot of commonality in what they bring. They're all pretty offensively.
There's just not a lot of defense, if that's what you mean.
Yes.
They're all really good offensive players.
Yes. But that's what I'm getting at. There is no team, at least in my rankings, like a team that matters, that has so many players that basically their strengths are all on one end of the floor, largely on one end of the floor, and the weaknesses all on the other. And that is a concern. Even as somebody who thinks the Lakers are going to have a good season, I think they're going to be a good team because they have talent and talent matters. But thinking about this, both for this season and projecting forward as you're looking to build and maximize around Luka, these are the things that I get concerned about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, would it be ideal if the Lakers could, let's say LeBron, because the other thing about it too is like there are two ways of this. It's like, are you looking at Reeves and Luka as like your two top paid guys? Because if that's the case, then you actually do have a fair amount of flexibility to add 2 or 3 other guys who are making essentially Reeves money or close to it. But that doesn't. I don't think that's the Lakers' plan necessarily, at least right now. I think what they picture is taking Luka and then surrounding him with a third or second elite player. Basically putting somebody in the LeBron slot, and then Austin Reeves is still where he is. And now, yes, you have less room to find those other guys, but it is important, at least to me, to not get so wrapped up in what is the perfect that you kind of make it the enemy of the good. Like, you may just need to operate under a system where like this is the access we have to the players that are like really good. And is it perfect? No, but it's also better than a lot of alternatives. And unless we can find those other guys, and they are in incredibly high demand. You mentioned Lou Dort the other day as like a guy who's going to be coming up, might be let go by the Thunder when he's a free agent. He's also going to make significantly more money. Great defensive player, but some of his offensive shortcomings, if you double his salary or something like that, are going to be more, people will have more criticisms of them. They'll become more important. I'm not saying I wouldn't want Lou Dort. I would.
Well, I don't think his salary is going to be doubled. Is more what I meant. No, it matters. I think he's making in like the 20s or something. He's not going to become a $50 million player.
No, but he could be he could be near 40. That's a big difference. He's going to make, in theory, he's going to make more money. If he's going to make more money, if he gets a raise or something like that.
He's currently making less than 20.
Right. So he could be making 30 something in his next contract. As a young player, one of the, with a great defensive reputation, and all that. There's no reason to think there's no reason necessarily to think he wouldn't make, the type of money that Reeves is, at the very least. If I could choose between the two of them, especially if I knew I could, I'd probably take Dort. But somebody made a comment on, and we can quit here, but somebody made a comment on the YouTube page. Derek DMing, it looks like. It's hard to tell. But anyway, he noted that, one of the biggest successes that you got to be careful not to totally strip away ball handling, secondary playmaking, and all that stuff around Luka. Like, it's good to have shooters. It's good to have guys who can spread the floor. But he pointed out Luka's had a ton of success with Kyrie Irving, in part because of what Kyrie does. And, Kyrie can be a decent defender, but he's undersized. And, so I think you can make those skill sets work. You just then have to be very targeted with who's that third star that you're bringing in. Are they really going to get Giannis, or is it going to be somebody else? Like, who are the supporting characters? Can you fill in with the Marcus Smarts of the world, with the Dorian Finney-Smiths of the world, when those guys aren't expected or needed to put in a bucket? Like, can you find one good young player somewhere in the draft or whatever and rebalance your salary that year? I think there are ways around this to balance some of the things that you're worried about, rightly.
Real quick before we go, over this weekend, I think Friday night, but either Friday or Saturday, DeAndre Ayton is going to throw out the first pitch for the Dodgers. It is a very regular and fun rite of passage for different Lakers, particularly new Lakers. They get this opportunity to throw out the first pitch. And unlike, say, Paul George or Chris Paul, who've done this for the Clippers, they're not going to get booed. I am very curious, though, to see the quality of DeAndre Ayton's pitching. I have no idea if he's ever even played baseball background. I Googled DeAndre Ayton and baseball, and the only thing that came up was that he's throwing out this first pitch. So I have no idea.
A lot of wind up. A lot of things can go wrong with your mechanics when you're 7 feet tall. That's just a lot of, other than Randy Johnson, you don't see a lot of guys for whom this really worked. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can hang out with over 36,000 subscribers to the channel. Make sure you subscribe on Apple. Make sure you subscribe on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday.
What was the